whenever workmen migrate, a lot of them don't migrate, especially from the rural areas, just by themselves. They migrate with the whole family.
The success of several Japanese joint ventures that we have had. Maruti Suzuki is one of the most prominent ones. We had seen Hero Honda. Then there is Toyota.
What is interesting is that India was an importer of smartphones till a few years back. And now, I think as of 2024, it has exported about 15 billion worth of smartphones.
There are countries and jurisdictions, for example, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia. They are our competitors. And when different countries, they are trying to relocate their supply chain, let me tell you, they are also looking at these jurisdictions.
Welcome to another episode of Transforming India, The Road to 2047, presented by Mint in partnership with JSA. I'm your host, Anil Padmanabhan. And today, we are diving into a sector poised to power India's next growth leap, manufacturing. With global uncertainties from inflation pressures and policy shifts in the United States to post-pandemic supply chain realignments, India is emerging as a serious alternative for global manufacturing. From PLI schemes to renewable energy and cybersecurity, the shift is real. But are we ready? Let us explore this conversation further with our experts. Joining us today is Shivpriya Nanda, a senior partner at JSA with over 30 years of experience in mergers and acquisitions, corporate restructuring, and strategic advisory. She has advised Fortune 500 companies across complex sectors like defense, retail, and aviation. Renowned for her legal acumen and business-centric counsel, she has consistently ranked among India's top lawyers. Shivpriya is also a strong advocate for pro bono work and gender equality in the legal profession. We are also accompanied by Trisheet Chatterjee, partner at JSA, who is an expert in cross-border mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, corporate restructuring, and fundraising. Trisheet also takes the lead in the firm's Japan-India practice and has been advising several large Japanese corporations on their India-related investments and projects. Trisheet brings a sharp commercial lens to complex deals, offering end-to-end advisory services across sectors and transaction stages. He is also a trusted advisor on corporate governance, regulatory compliance, and strategic legal planning for growth-focused businesses. Welcome to the podcast, Shivpriya and Trisheet.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the introduction. It's great to be with you here today with Trisheet.
Thank you, Anil. It's wonderful to be here.
Shivpriya, can I begin with you? So India has set itself an ambitious target of scaling manufacturing to contribute 1 trillion to the country's GDP. But we all know there are structural bottlenecks along the way. So what are the policy reforms or tweaks that can be undertaken by the government, whether be it land and labor reforms, industrial zoning, or skilling frameworks, so that India can realize this ambition?
So, we have to go back a little bit in history, and it's always 6x6 vision in hindsight. In the 90s, when the FDI opened up, right, the Indian economy opened up, somehow there was not enough focus on manufacturing at that time. So the policy was not geared to encourage manufacturing. It was a protectionist policy in terms of percentages and joint ventures, compulsory joint ventures. But there was no guidance that, we are encouraging manufacturing sector. Now that has, of course, changed a lot in the last 2 decades. We've had great progress. As far as the growth of the manufacturing sector is concerned, to 25% of the GDP effectively, that's what it means. Virtually means doubling what its current contribution is. That is going to take a lot of effort. Of course, the government has brought in several policies, on the labor reforms, on accommodations for employees, for zoning regulations in terms of setting up specific industrial townships, belts, the Bombay highway, all of that has, of course, is going to contribute. But let me touch briefly on some of these policy initiatives. So if we look at the labor reforms, that code, the paperwork is all done, but unfortunately, the codes have not been implemented. The drafts are all ready, but because of the farmers' agitation, they were sort of put on the back burner. What they envision is really consolidating the multiple labor laws into 4 codes, simplifying the codes, reducing the challenges of compliances, and taking away a lot of sort of prosecution which was enshrined in the earlier labor codes. What is good is, at least, so while the center has not been able to implement it, some of the states wanting to have a head start as far as attractiveness is concerned of these states for investment, they have implemented some of the labor reforms. So whether it is increasing the number of workmen for retrenchment, the threshold for retrenchment from 100 to 300, whether it is providing for late night work for women, the thresholds for contract labor licenses from existing 20 to 50. So there are states which have done it, and hopefully that will set the benchmark for other states to take those initiatives too, because those states are definitely going to attract more investment because of ease of doing business in those states. So that's as far as the labor law reforms are concerned. Then the center has also come up with a policy which is called SAFE, which is basically setting up of accommodation for employees, for factory employees next to the on-site accommodation. So these are supposed to be like dormitories, and the state and the central government has proposed that they will be set up on the PPP mode. Again, there are challenges around it. Of course, there is a challenge of just capital funding, who's going to be interested in these projects because they have not been tested really. And what is the level of government support that's going to be there, both for from the local state governments and the central governments. For the workmen, of course, it's envisioned that they will have cheaper accommodation, cleaner accommodation, and it'll help migration of workmen, because that's a big challenge. So it'll be interesting to see whether there'll be weekday hostels, very much like weekday schools, or they will be, workmen will be coming and staying there. So they aim to provide a monthly accommodation to a workman of about 80 square feet for about 3,000 rupees. Again, what it does not take care of is, and we've seen that, is that whenever workmen migrate, a lot of them don't migrate, especially from the rural areas, just by themselves. They migrate with the whole family. So if these are really hostels only for, say, male or female workmen, it will be a challenge, because it will also split the family and where does the child stay. So I don't think that has been thought through. And the second thing is that the success will also depend upon the rest of the infrastructure. So power and water continues to be a huge issue in India. And even in places like Gurgaon, we don't have adequate power and water supply. So that's going to be an impediment, because we are providing housing quarters for the workmen. They have to have power and water there. And then coming to the issue of various land zoning issues as far as these hostels are concerned, there are a number of places where dual use is not allowed. So you can't have industrial premises and residential premises there. Then there will also be a question of what is the supporting infrastructure in terms of hospitals, schools, and the rest of it, shopping, that could make life comfortable for a workman, so that he choose to stay in the hostel versus continuing to stay in a town, close by town, and commuting and spending money on transport. So these are some of the challenges as far as this initiative is concerned. And of course, there is the PLI initiative, which is there. A number of other changes have been made by the government in terms of improving the ease of doing business in India, but there's still a long way to go.
So, thank you. You have kind of laid out the ecosystem and the gaps in the ecosystem that both the union and state governments need to address. So, Trisheet, if I can turn to you, and
Sure.
explore the opportunity that is coming India's way. Like Shivpriya nicely laid out the challenges in the ecosystem and what needs to be resolved. So, the US is grappling with persistent manufacturing supply chain disruptions following its face-off with China, volatile input costs, and shifting trade alignments. So, amid this global turmoil, how can India position itself to exploit this opportunity?
Thank you, Anil. So, first of all, I think the juncture that we are in, it is not only a manufacturing turmoil that's happening, but it is a turmoil in terms of geopolitical and economic turmoil that we are witnessing across the globe. So, on one hand, as you can see, we are looking at war and conflicts scenarios across various regions and various parts of the globe. And on the other hand, we are looking at the trade and the tariff war that is going on. And of course, India is getting impacted, and like many other countries of the world. And at this juncture, I think, it would definitely impact the Indian economy and the manufacturing sector. But we have to see how long it takes before, we come out of it. And under this context, I think, there are certain things which I believe that India could do better, and I emphasize on the word better. So I think the first thing what we can do is that India could reduce inconsistencies in its policies and also reduce the bureaucratic hurdles. So see, the point is that, India has come up with a lot of policy reforms and incentives over the years, like the PLI scheme, the Make in India, the Swachh Bharat, and all of those things, which in turn also impacts and betters, if I may say so, the manufacturing sector. See, all of this is good on paper, but when you actually implement it, then comes the real problem. And we as lawyers, when we try to advise our clients who would want to avail any of these schemes, then there is a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, regulatory issues, which takes a lot of time to resolve, right? And, when we are in India and as an Indian manufacturer, still they understand some of the issues that are in India. But that's not an excuse for these, delays and hurdles that's being faced. But now replace it with, an overseas player who's wanting to come to India and to set up its establishment. So, there is definitely frustration, and then there is a lack of confidence over a period of time. And in turn, I think, if these guys, they decide that they do not want to be in India and they want to be in some other jurisdiction, at the end of the day, we miss out on it. The second point that I want to make is that we have to have a quick resolve in terms of the strategic trade agreements and thereby increase the exports. So there are certain, trade agreements which is pending for some time, and to top it all, we have the trade and tariff war which is going on. So I think the governments should engage, with other nations and quickly conclude these trade agreements, which will in turn increase the exports, because some of the exports and there is a question mark on what is going to be the tariff on some of the products, etc., which is kind of impacting the manufacturing sector. The third part which I want to mention is that, the entire aspect of infrastructure and logistics, and we have to improve that, and we have to reduce the bottlenecks. So I think logistics and infrastructure goes hand in hand with manufacturing. So we can reduce the cost burden, we can increase the efficiency in manufacturing if we reduce these bottlenecks. So think about a situation, right? I mean, we talk about various types of goods, and if these goods are perishable goods, right, and which needs to be transported, so there has to be good technology in logistics. There has to be good railroad transportation systems which can pick up these goods from where they are produced and goes to the end customers. And if it is exports, then you can think how further it is going to impact exports and what would be the quality of these goods when it reaches the end customers. The fourth one, I think, which comes to my mind is that we have to, I think, further empower the MSMEs. And this is very important. If you look at developed economies like, say, a Germany, a Japan, which also lays a strong emphasis on their manufacturing, so they provide a lot of support to the MSMEs. And in India, I think, the credit facilities, for example, that is happening to the MSMEs, but we have to, I think, streamline it further. We have to have good repayment terms, reasonable interest terms, etc., so that, they have, they can avail the credit facilities. The fourth one, I think, there are countries and jurisdictions, for example, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia. So whatever it is, they are our competitors. And when different countries, they are trying to relocate their supply chain and manufacturing facilities, they are, let me tell you, they are also looking at these jurisdictions. So when policy reforms and changes and ease of doing business happens in those countries, I think we have to be very vigilant and nimble and quickly change our policies. If we don't do that, if there is a large corporation who is wanting to set up in this region, they would choose those countries over India, and then we lose out. And the last one, I think, we as, the government is doing its bit, but I think we also have to do our bit. And when we do advise on transactions, and most of the times we represent, foreign players who are looking at investments and projects in India, when the negotiation happens, we have seen that there is a huge mismatch between what is the pricing that is thought through by an investor, global investor, and the Indian promoters and the owners of businesses who are in the manufacturing sector. So now what happens is that because of this mismatch, the deals don't proceed and it gets stuck. Whereas, India misses out. And I would say that Indian group also misses out on such an opportunity, not only of getting the investment, but also they bring in a lot of skill, technology, research and development with them, which India can use. But unfortunately, if there is no deal and there is no investment, so also we lose out on those aspects. So I think these are some of the, the things that we can improve. We have done it over a period of time, but I think we could do better, if I may say so.
So what you're saying is that there is a huge opportunity, but India needs to do a lot of heavy lifting to get there. You particularly highlighted the problem of red tape. And one of the schemes, if I may turn to Shivpriya, is this PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme. It was designed particularly to overcome all the handicaps that both of you have already listed before us. So my question to you is that from a legal and policy perspective, is this scheme truly driving committed investments and capacity building, particularly from foreign players? You heard Trisheet, the points he had mentioned. So are there any legal considerations or regulatory hurdles that overseas companies need to navigate fully before benefiting from PLI?
So, it is an ambitious scheme, definitely. There was supposed to be outlay of 25 billion in terms of incentives. and there were 14 identified sectors. And some of the sectors have done well comparatively, and some have been complete laggards. Now, the sectors which have done comparatively well, one of them is, of course, the mobile manufacturing, a smartphone manufacturing industry, with the players like Apple and Google setting up their manufacturing facilities here. What is interesting is that India was an importer of smartphones till a few years back, and now I think as of 2024 it has exported about 15 billion worth of smartphones. So that's clearly an industry which has done well. The question is that, you know, there are industries and industries, and each industry has its own problems. Smartphones have the advantage of a very, very mature, ready market, and it is very, very different from a textile industry or, pharma industry, which is then, for instance, if you take the pharma industry, they have their own set of guidelines, because don't forget that this scheme was really meant to also boost exports. Of course, take care of the local demand, but also boost exports. Now, the pharma industry, if it has to exports across to different countries, each of those countries have huge amount of regulations in terms of imported pharmaceuticals. So for them to be able to easily sell their pharma products in those countries, it's perhaps more beneficial for them to set up manufacturing in those countries rather than set it up in India. Of course, there is a whole process where Indian manufacturing, especially in generics, gets FDA approval, but it's a complicated process. It's not simple, it's not easy. It's not like some, you say generics, no patents required, no IP complications. There seems to be a big market for it, let me set it up. But if you do not have the wherewithal to make those kind of investments, irrespective of the incentives that are provided, it will be a difficult thing for a new player to step in. And that's been the case for a lot of sectors because of the conditions in terms of domestic value add, and that's more so has been seen in the automobile sector, and capital commitment requirements. The scheme has been slow to take off, or the impact has been not what was expected. So, for instance, in the automobile sector, yes, it's a sector where India is doing well, right? We've exported to Japan, for instance. Maruti has recently exported, I think, 1,700 vehicles to Japan. But, that is not really taking care of the issue that the sector faces, especially in the EV space where there are a lot of small players. And if the policy is uncertain, right? And I would not blame the policy makers because it's a new field, relatively new field. And so, they have to keep making policies have to be agile at the end of the day. But from a person who's then getting into manufacturing, the constant policy changes that comes with its own problem. So net, the scheme has not attained the success that it was supposed to attain, right? Only, I think, 8% of the incentives have actually been dispersed. That says a lot, right? 8% of the incentives being dispersed, and I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, it's only about 30% of the production which has been achieved. And this is with, if you look at the industrial, rate of utilization, I think in the last quarter it was 76%. So that means new investment is not really coming into the PLI scheme. There are, of course, old players, more seasoned players who are there, but it's not encouraging newer players to come in. Having said that, the last we heard was that the government has announced that they are not going to introduce any more new sectors into the scheme, and they are not going to give time extension. So that means that the scheme will lapse by a flux of time.
But in a way, credit to the government, they at least tried, because you need to.
Absolutely. It had to make a beginning. And that's why I said in response to your first question that for first 20 years, we had ignored. And just because you fail or, a scheme does not do well, that doesn't mean it has had no traction. It has had some traction. So the needle has moved, and we are a nation which is, which is trying, right? So you will, when you try, you will make errors. It's, somebody told me a long time back that if you're somebody who makes decisions, you will be criticized. So the easiest thing to do is not make any decisions.
So Trisheet, if I may turn to you, because in passing, Shivpriya had mentioned about how Japan was one of the earliest investors in India, and the Maruti project everyone talks about. And you yourself work very closely with Japanese companies. I was curious, are Japan and India managing to deepen their industrial partnerships across semiconductors, EVs, and precision engineering? Are they when they're reevaluating their regional footprint, is India part of their game plan?
No, definitely, I think Japan is quite interesting, and just to set the context, I think advising Japanese companies is a totally a different ball game. So I've done US, I've done European companies, and also in the last several years, Japan India investments. It's been quite important for me. So I think they are very, very cautious, not only in setting up their manufacturing or entering a market, but in every phase of their life, right? So as they say that I think any surprise, good or bad, is bad for Japanese. So it is meticulous planning, immense thinking that goes on over the years before they take a decision. So having said that, yes, I agree that we have seen Japan being one of the biggest investors in the last few decades, and they are not a new entrant. And over the years, I think the type of investments, etc., that have changed. And I definitely believe that India is a jurisdiction that they look at very favorably. Some of the reasons are because of India itself, and some of the reasons are what is going on in Japan. So I think first thing what I can think of is that Japan itself is a shrinking market, right? Both in terms of their economy, return on investments, if they make the investments domestically in Japan, as well as in their population. So that is why, of course, they have to deploy their funds in other jurisdictions, and India is one of the prominent ones. But as I said, Japan also looks at other countries such as Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and we have to be mindful about that so that we can attract these investments. The second part, I think, the success of several Japanese joint ventures that we have had, as well as, Japanese companies when they have come alone and set up their establishments in India. So Shivpriya mentioned, so we all know that Maruti Suzuki is one of the most prominent ones. We had seen Hero Honda. Now it is only Honda after the JV has got ended. Then there is, Daikin. Then there is Toyota. So I think the names can go on and it is endless. So when there is a success in, say, automobiles, so Japan follows the suit. So in auto and auto comp, there would be several investments, by Japanese companies. Then I think, the China plus one strategy also is playing on the minds of the Japanese, and they have to look at an alternative. So this started, I think, from 2020. So till about 22, we did not see much movement, but from 23 onwards, we have again seen a spurt of investments and interests from Japanese companies to look at India. And I think, the other factors, what I can think of is that, so there are several expatriates who come from Japan, right? So the living standards, and if you move to Gurgaon, For example, their living standards are very good. They love playing golf. There are restaurants, there are grocery shops which sells Japanese products. So I think that also adds to them looking at favorably. And I think over the years, if you look at, from a political standpoint, whether it was from the times of Mr. Shinzo Abe and Mr. Modi, they developed very good relations between themselves, and a lot of initiatives were taken when Mr. Abe was alive. And even with the past prime ministers of Japan, and even the new one who's assumed office in October 2024. So there's a lot of bonhomie and good relations, and I think it is just going to develop further, and we are going to see good returns and good results, I would say, in the next few decades as far as Japanese investments are concerned.
So true, Trisheet, because even anecdotally, the kind of our introduction to Japanese food has now this such a wide menu of options for all of us. We're just running out of time, so finally, Shivpriya, question to you. As global players, we mentioned the case of Japan, the United States. You also talked at length about the iPhone. Are increasingly relying on smart manufacturing, right, and digital technologies. So what are the key legal considerations that India must address, to encourage setting up of such sophisticated technology manufacturing in India?
So, till now, mostly the way the Information Technology Act is drafted, it really catered to the service industry, right? And most of the personal data protection provisions, or that was really for the service industry. And as far as the cybersecurity piece is concerned, that was sort of more clearly, of course, fintech had is covered by both in terms of cybersecurity provisions, in terms of data protection provisions. Manufacturing till now had less of a role as far as issues of data privacy or cybersecurity were concerned. But as you're saying that there is smart manufacturing which is coming into play, there are certain industries which already have regulations. For instance, if you look at the electricity industry, the wind power manufacturers or other manufacturers where the power, in terms of the power equipment which is imported and which sort of communicates with various aspects of the distribution system, all imported components have to go through a check. They have to be tested in India, just as telecom, some of the imported telecom equipment needs to go through the same hoops. So they are tested for malware, Trojanware, and other issues, because the whole focus for data protection is, of course, it is to protect the data of individuals. It is also to create or address the need for usage of data. And as far as cybersecurity is concerned, the issue is, of course, much larger in terms of national security and similar issues. So those are the things which are also concerning our lawmakers. And the Digital Personal Data Protection Act was enacted in 2023. However, it has not been implemented. So that's ongoing process. So anyone who's coming to India needs to go through the provisions of that act, because once it's implemented, you already have the provisions of the act. You have the provisions of the bill. It may not have been enacted, but what is the line of thinking of the lawmakers. So it's a good idea to go through the provisions and see that your manufacturing systems are complying with it. And it's really no different as far as the provisions are concerned to what you may see in other countries. It's all countries are doing the same. They want to protect the data. They want to protect privacy, and that's what India is also trying to do. So I don't think I mean, these are also matters of posturing when people complain that, India is being unduly harsh. I don't think India is being unduly harsh. I think it's pretty normal for any country to want to protect what is really the asset of the future, right? It is really the asset of the future till we have a different kind of take on it and people start owning their own personal data and monetizing it. That time hasn't come, but maybe it will come, right? And as far as the intellectual property rights are concerned or protection of IP is concerned, India has for several years had a very proactive judiciary who have really protected intellectual property rights of foreign companies. So I don't think that is an issue that foreign companies or global investors have to worry about at all as far as India is concerned. We have several very seasoned, very experienced judges who have given excellent judgments in this space. So I think people should, global players should feel very, very confident about that.
So true what you said, Shivpriya, because the privacy laws in this country are deeply influenced by the judicial intervention. So we'll stop at that. Thank you so much, Shivpriya, and thank you so much, Trisheet.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anil.
That wraps up today's insightful discussion on India's manufacturing leap. From global turbulence to localized innovation, the landscape is shifting rapidly. This has been another insightful episode of Transforming India, the Road to 2047. Thank you to our guests for their valuable insights and to our listeners. Stay tuned as we continue exploring the engines of India's transformation. Until next time, keep innovating, keep moving forward. This is your host, Anil Padmanabhan, signing off.